Welcome back to another episode of Psychocinematic. Today we'll be covering Honeymoon, directed by a name I'll probably butcher, Leigh Janiak. I'm so sorry if I got that wrong. But anyways, spoilers ahead as always. Though I'd love it if you listen to the entire episode. If you're only here because you want to know some of the deeper meanings of the movie, you can skip to that. There'll be chapters in the description. But otherwise, I will be going in chronological order in the movie and talking about things that stuck out to me, symbolism, what have you. It's funny because the very first note that I took for this movie was before I was alone and now I'm not, which is the exact way they end this movie. I knew that was going to be some foreshadowing, and I could already tell just by what they were saying there that this movie was going to be chocked full of foreshadowing for me to sink my teeth into. So Bea and Paul get to the cottage in Canada, and there's another little bit of foreshadowing right away with the ducks. I believe Paul asked about the ducks and Bea was saying, oh, they're fake and hollow, and I used to hide things inside when I was a kid. And that's just super foreshadowing for the fact that she's going to be hollow. The aliens are going to be hiding things in her, those tentacle things that we see later. Not to mention she basically becomes a fake Bea because she loses who she truly is. So I never watched a trailer for this movie. I only looked at the synopsis and it was talking about someone going missing during the trip. I didn't know who was going to go missing, but I quickly found out after the flashing lights through the window, and I was so pumped. I was like, oh baby, is this aliens? I had no idea what it was going to be. And if you watch the trailer, it doesn't look like aliens. They intentionally went out of their way to let that kind of be a surprise, even though we learned that within, it seems like I think the first 15, maybe 20 minutes that there's these flashing lights, and I immediately assumed aliens. After lots of lovemaking, I believe Paul said in the morning that she needs to rest her womb, and I immediately quoted that in my notes, and it was like, for the aliens. And I didn't even know at this point that the aliens were going to be doing anything to her womb, but holy fuck, I was right. So here we get to basically the first stem of the deeper things I'm going to talk about later. But Bea says how she used to catch baby frogs as a kid to use them as bait. And there is a constant bait reference throughout this film. And at this point, I'm wondering if she is the bait. I wrote down this little note that I thought that this movie was doing a pretty good job at making it seem like these two actually have a really tight chemistry. But I said that it might have been a little overboard to not look like they're on their honeymoon, but more in their honeymoon period. I feel like there is a difference because even on a honeymoon after you've been together for 1 to 5 years, however long until you got married, it's not quite as new, fresh, and exciting as when you first start dating someone and you just fall head over heels with them. And that first month to 3 months is just like amazing. But nonetheless, I enjoyed their chemistry. So at this point in the movie, Paul and Bea go to that restaurant, and then they see Will there, who the optics of it, he's looking abusive and like he might be keeping Annie there hostage, Annie being his wife, who we later find out is also being like piloted, possessed, taken, what have you, by these aliens. And yeah, so we learned that it really is just the optics that he looks abusive, because Paul basically does the same thing. It's because you can't get answers out of the one you love and you're trying to save them, and you know something's up and you know that they need help. Also, something interesting that we'll be touching on later is the fact that Annie was telling them that they should leave. So the morning of Bea going on her sleepwalking excursion to meet aliens, Paul was going to go fishing. And I thought it was hilarious because he just drops all these worms and he's just like, I'm not going to pick it up. Like power's out or something. And he just leaves them all there. Maybe he did it after the fact. But again, we're touching on bait. And it's a little bit of foreshadowing that he's going to be that worm cast into the lake. I like the way that they wrote into this movie the ways that Bea was starting to act different, between not battering the French toast, not knowing how to cook the coffee. When she wants to go and take a nap, she says, I'm going to go take a sleep. All those things are just slightly off, increasing that kind of uncanny valley that you're feeling about this person who shouldn't be doing all that. So I enjoyed that. It was subtle, but enough to raise red flags for the other person in the film. So later, Paul sees Bea talking in the mirror, rehearsing, acting like she doesn't want to have sex because she's got a headache or something. And I wrote down that it was interesting that the alien doesn't want her to have sex, and we will touch on that a little bit later in this episode. I did find it interesting that B asked Paul why he would do that to the ants, because they're just ants, like because he I don't know, pushed them or blew on them or something like that, where he's kind of messing up their system. But I just thought that was interesting because we are probably like ants to aliens that would come here, based on the how inferior we would be to them. And so I am not really sure where I stand thought-wise for that, but if you know, or if you have a theory, let me know down in the comments. B hits us with this fun fact that worms can survive up to 5 minutes underwater. More foreshadowing for where Paul is going. Unfortunately, I doubt he could have survived 5 minutes, which maybe not be that unfortunate. Why prolong the fact that you're definitely going to drown by this alien? Paul goes to confront Will. Will's nowhere to be found, but he sees Annie. She's got the same leg marking. She's basically acting just like B. And, she says, oh, Will is hiding. Yeah, hiding underwater as you drive away on a boat with rope. The aliens come to abduct Annie and B, and I gotta say the makeup that they had on B was super gross and really good looking. And then they end it with before I was alone and now I am not, and she's got multiple of these aliens living inside her, because when Paul pulls out one of those alien creatures, she says how there's more in there, and she wants them out. And it seems like after one of them came out, she got to have a little bit of herself back, and it seemed like she had the ability to try and fight a little bit longer. So now to get into a little bit of the deeper meanings, in my opinion, about this movie. So like I said earlier, I originally questioned whether or not B was the bait, which also the very fact that her name is B, bait, for Paul, and the idea that maybe the aliens are trying to use her as bait to then capture more than one person, which might be kind of difficult, or maybe they're using her as bait to catch the more difficult person, and that might actually be true, but I don't think so. So it seems like both B and Annie are fighting a little bit to retain some sort of semblance of who they are, and maybe they are actually trying to save their significant others, but the fact that they have aliens in them that's slowly changing what's going on in their brain, and the aliens don't seem to quite understand how the world works when you see the way B is conducting herself, especially when she was eating that marshmallow, where she's just picking off pieces of a burnt marshmallow off the stick. Weird. Maybe that is why it came across like you need to hide underwater. So maybe they're getting a part of what the alien knows, that the alien cannot go underwater, and they genuinely do want to protect their significant other. Or maybe it's because they know that drowning in this lake will be better than being abducted by the alien. And Annie herself told them while they were at the restaurant that they shouldn't be there. So maybe she was trying to save them, because maybe she knows that the aliens want the women and they want to kill the men and take the women. Or perhaps the alien knows that B and Paul's presence at that restaurant is jeopardizing their entire mission of trying to abduct a woman. I do think that Paul is the bait being cast into the lake and B is the fish that is being caught. Paul thought he was tying the knot on quite a catch, but really that catch was the aliens. Now think about the name of this movie too. I like it because I feel like it works on 3 different levels. So Honeymoon, they're on a honeymoon. Honey Bee, that's her nickname with Paul, and then honeymoon, moon, space, aliens, that works too. Now here's my favorite theory and what I feel like is the deeper meaning for B, Honey Bee. I think that she is the pollinator for alien reproduction. So think about it. She has sex with Paul during this trip, Paul being a flower. So now she has Paul's sperm inside of her. They already made the comment earlier in the movie about, oh, I'm not quite ready to have a kid. And it's like, well, you're probably not going to have a choice if the alien says anything about it. So now she's got that sperm. They put tentacles into her vaginal area, and who knows with, how long those things are, how far they extend, but they could potentially be feeding on the sperm and all the nutrients in her body to use her body as a reproduction vessel. And I don't think it's a coincidence that both B and Annie are the ones being affected, and they are in committed relationships with men, and they're probably both sexually active. I don't know on Annie and Will's side, but I don't think that's a coincidence. And then every time we see the alien in this movie, we can see that it has a humanoid silhouette. So that's my theory. I feel like I'm right, but you never know. I often read way too much into these things. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie and totally recommend it if you haven't seen it. And for some reason you liked watching this entire thing filled with spoilers, you should definitely go watch it as well. So that's all I have for you guys today on the movie Honeymoon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, and I'll see you in the next one.